Thank you everyone for joining us today. Delighted to be here to share some great thoughts from customers about engaging a hybrid workforce. I'm Rebecca Wedeman with Valoir, an independent analyst and research firm focused on people apps, customer experience, employee experience, and looking more closely at work from home recently. Boy, it's been an interesting 12 months, hasn't it? In looking at the move to remote work, we've seen a lot of changes in the way employees are managed and the way they are engaged. In a recent study, we looked at employees and work from home and found that 70% of workers would prefer to work from home after the pandemic. This is up from 40% who answered the same question about this time last year. So clearly workers are getting comfortable in their work from home environments. We found a lot of other things are changing with the workforce as well. 1 in 10 workers moved house in the past year. But how are they working with their employers? And how are employees keeping employee engaged? We found that only 4 in 10 workers would give their employers an A grade for engaging remote workers, and only 1 in 3 would give them an A grade for supporting morale. So as we think about in that context, I'd like to talk with our panelists today about engaging in a hybrid workforce. David, Phil, Ian, welcome. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. Please, Ian, can you go first?
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. It's good to be here. My name is Ian Kaminsky. I'm CEO for FirstCare, and we sit kind of in the health tech sector with a really critical human twist to our service. We help companies address the impacts of absence through a nurse-led triage service, combined with a tech platform that brings together information and delivers that about employees and to companies. And in doing so, we help improve the well-being of employees, make companies more productive by reducing absence, and provide insights to our clients that help them alleviate the pain of absence. I've been working for over 25 years or so with businesses to help them take advantage of technology, from mobile to search to marketplaces, and now well-being and productivity. And as you said, the last year has been incredibly interesting. What we've found is there really hasn't been a pandemic handbook written for us to follow, but we've done our best. We've worked with a lot of our partners. It's really important to have strong partners during this and have our employees step up in the way that they have. So I'm really excited to talk about what we've done with our organization from a people perspective to an environment perspective. So thanks for having me on.
Fantastic, Ian. Thank you. Phil, you want to go next?
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm Phil Schultz, Vice President of Customer Experience at Telus. And for those not familiar with Telus, we are a Canadian company based nationally here on mobility services and residential services, smart home solutions, health, and recently agriculture. And our team is global in nature. We've got team members across Canada as well as across the globe through our Telus International partner. And similar to Ian, a lot learned in the last 14 months throughout the pandemic. And working from home, I think agility has been the name of the game. And I think we've done well, and hopefully can share some of those lessons as well as learn from Ian and David.
Absolutely. Great, Phil. Thanks. And David?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is David Goldstein. I work for the technical service department as a workforce manager as well as data analytics. I'm responsible for data gathering, reporting, benchmarking, and gathering analytics for the performance of our teams and our agents within it. Carestream Dental is a technology company. We support dozens of product lines of both software and hardware, from intraoral cameras, extraoral imaging equipment, digital imaging, practice management software, all used by oral health professionals. So our customers day in and day out are office managers, front office staff, back office staff, IT technicians, that kind of thing. We are headquartered in Atlanta, but we also have contact centers all around the world: England, Germany, Sweden, India, the Philippines, and Australia. We take about 40 to 50,000 interactions a month, and we have a global service team of over 200 agents, some of which interact with each other day in and day out from overseas. That's us. Thanks for having me.
Wow, thank you, David. That's great. And you touched on this a little bit, David, in terms of your locations, but maybe really quickly we could just talk about how many employees engaged in how many locations? And then quickly, what did the pandemic mean short term for your workforce, and sort of where are you today?
Short term, well, we're mainly headquartered in Atlanta. But we do have, again, centers across the globe. Most of our employees out of Atlanta are employees that have a long history of working from geographically dispersed locations. We've been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
Where we have people in all over the country and all over the world. With that, as it pertains to COVID-19, while our volume dramatically declined throughout the summer, naturally, some of our regions, as such, made very little changes to actually how we offered service. We had very little impact to our customers. In other regions, such as India, for example, we had to completely change the way we work with our customers. In this region, the historical business model for supporting certain products was primarily field service. As a result of the pandemic, we were actually able to accelerate some of the acceptance as it relates to a completely different remote service model. So it was difficult for both of our customers and our agents, but with the help of things like laptops and in areas where having good connection was a challenge, we provided 4G dongles, and then of course with the help of Genesis Cloud, we went from almost exclusively field service to solving hundreds of problems without even stepping any foot on site.
It's a big shift. That's a big shift. I know, Ian, you made some big changes too. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your employees, their locations, and what short term looked like, and where you all are today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're wholly based in the UK, and we had about probably 40% of our staff had worked from home prior to the pandemic, and that moved obviously to 100% after the pandemic. So short term, there were significant impacts to the way we did business, one of which was our service in general. We had massive spikes in call volume, up to 7 times our normal daily volume, because we were supporting people who were specifically going through COVID-19. So our clients had employees who were going to be absent because of COVID-19, and we were supporting those people. So we had to deal with completely new types of calls, with daily changes to government guidance and rules, much longer calls due to stress levels of our members who were going through the pandemic. And we had tech upgrades that needed to happen to support all of these increases. So there's a tremendous impact on the service that we were providing and how we were providing that service. So we absolutely went into our business continuity plan, which people pay a lot of lip service to, but really became a reality quite quickly. And that impacted obviously a number of different areas, such as our work environment. So as I mentioned, we went to 100% remote working from home, which had an impact on, I think David mentioned, the hardware that people were using. It had an impact on the office space that different people had in their houses. We had to deal with isolation, distractions, which are probably going to happen on some of these calls if any of our dogs get a little restless. But we had to deal with that as part of our calls. And simple things like desk and chair equipment. If somebody had a poor chair at their house, that would impact them over time. And then from a people perspective, we had to change, obviously, many of our ways of working, because we weren't going to see people face to face. It meant for the first time, our group was experiencing the same stressful situations that our members were calling in about. And that's really different than taking a call for somebody going through something when you're going through it yourself. So we had a lot to deal with, from stress and unease with our members, as well as with our own staff. And you mentioned short-term versus long-term, and that's a really important distinction to make, because people will accept a lot of things when they think they're short-term. And our teams were fantastic in stepping up. We worked very long hours, certainly in the beginning stages when our volumes were so high. People were taking on lots of different roles. We were working significant hours to get the technology to support us during the crisis. But that crisis mode, you can't withstand that crisis mode forever. And when you think something's going to end soon, you can accept it. But when it takes it when you realize it's going to be there for a long time. And now we've been in sort of that situation for about 14 months at certainly various levels of crisis. We had to do things a lot differently, and we had to kick in programs that we have now ongoing that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later, that was required to support the staff who were under tremendous pressure before, but are now dealing with different kinds of things as we realize this is a long-term situation.
Yes, we'll definitely get back to that, Ian. I definitely want to dig in on that. Thank you. And maybe Phil, you could share just quickly a bit about what happened short term and where you are today.
Sure. I think a lot of our experiences are similar to Ian's and David. We have approximately 8,000 team members in our contact center across 15 locations globally. And as the pandemic hit, we could see it coming and started to do a bit of planning, but the actual event and lockdowns happened a lot more quickly and was compounded by the multiple locations we're in. Every jurisdiction had different rules in terms of agent or team member access to locations, how they could access, et cetera. So we quickly mobilized and got the equipment out for team members to work from home. Prior to COVID, we had 40% of our team members at home, so had some of the technology processes and methods in place and quickly had to roll those out broadly. We got up to around 75% of our team members working from home within just over a week. And then 3 weeks in, we were at 100% of our team members working from home, or actually a little bit shy of 100 because there were some team members for different reasons that had to come into the office. It was remarkable in terms of the ability to roll that out, and really it was a drive for us to make sure we kept our team members safe and continuity of our services as well. With us being a telecoms provider and everyone going home, it was really important that we ensured that mobile service and home residential services were there and ready for our customers as they shifted themselves and their children and others to a work from home environment. So was rapid, and I can think we look back and are very proud of it and have a lot of lessons that we can carry forward into the future.
Hey, Rebecca, an interesting point I just wanted to mention something that Phil said is, you don't always realize that you have to maintain the service that you're providing during all of this change. And that's something that, kind of ups the ante in terms of delivering that service. And our service is a 24/7, 365 service. So we're constantly providing our service to employees that have 24-hour shifts. And that's something that really makes a big difference and makes it more real as you're providing that service, but also making massive changes in the way that you do things. So it's something that added a little extra intensity to the whole situation.
Absolutely, Ian. And it sounds like all of you had big changes, but also the idea of maintaining service during these big changes. To your earlier point, Ian, you can ask people to do things in crisis mode for a short period of time, but you're talking about big changes to the business that are going to last perhaps forever. In some situations, in some cases where you've made dramatic changes in the way you do business in the past year. It's interesting. David, I know you're a real data and metrics guy, metrics junkie. So can you talk a little bit about, are there new metrics that you're looking at, or a different cadence in the way you're measuring performance and employee engagement? How are you thinking about things differently? And is that something that you think has changed forever?
I think the answer to that is yes and no. There have been some changes, but not a lot. The good news is I work for a company that is very data driven and always has been. Being headquartered in Atlanta, our service organization already had, as I said before, a long history of leveraging remote agents. It was a pretty seamless transition for us. We have, for a while, had a pretty robust work from home program where we have office hoteling rotations and things like that. And as some people might know about Atlanta, a little bit of snow can shut down the entire city. So we do have a decent inclement weather procedure in place as well. So this, while it was a change, wasn't necessarily a change in the way we do things, how we measure our agents, that kind of thing. We had already fleshed out and created some consistency around how we manage how we coach, how we evaluate our agents' performance. And our managers were already pretty good at it. From an agent's perspective, having stood up gamification prior to COVID-19, and having already used it to stack rank our agents and our annual review cycles, they're already pretty familiar with what having near real-time feedback on their performance, how they compare to the team, that kind of thing. Where we did see a change naturally was in the areas of workforce management. It's less about employee engagement, but more really about how we were forecasting our volume, how we were right sizing our team, staffing, scheduling, which did impact everybody. It's a challenge in a climate where our historical patterns are all thrown out the window, pretty much. So coming up with creative ways to predict outcomes and countless scenarios, what if this happens, what if that happens, really was a day-to-day occurrence and really a struggle. Lots of back of the napkin math, so to speak. We did also partner during that time with a third party to handle a portion of our volume. This meant standing up a team internationally of over 100 agents completely on Genesis Cloud, gamification, heavy utilization of WFM, eMite data. We had to right size and staff those teams in a climate where we just didn't really know what was going to happen. We used it to audit, time, billable time, and then figuring out how to engage them and get them familiar with our metrics, and that kind of thing was something that we all did during this time as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine standing up a virtual team with everything else going on. That's quite an undertaking. Ian, how have you, I'm sorry, Phil, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing we saw, I'd love to hear if Ian and David saw the same as well. In the initial days of COVID, we saw a spike in our handle time of our agents overall, as well as an interesting roller coaster on our top 2 box scores, where in the first, I think, 3-4 weeks, the top 2 box actually went up considerably. I think just because of the appreciation of our customers and the fact that our agents were there. And then as the malaise of COVID settled in, the top 2 backs actually dropped down a fair amount, and it normalized since. But that was an interesting one as we worked through and trying to figure out and remediate that. And then the handle time, as I mentioned as well, our agents, those that weren't working from home prior to COVID, had an adjustment period on working from home, and the technology, working with their home setup, as Ian mentioned earlier, and having a good location or spot to have those conversations in a private way with our customers, and also in having a bit of chit chat. I think in the early days, especially, everyone wanted to talk a little bit about COVID, even when they called about their telecom services.
Everyone wanted to talk to another human being, certainly was true during that time. What about you from a data perspective, Ian? I know you had some pretty critical data that you were looking at.
Yeah, so our experience was similar in that average handle time went up. We were supporting people going through COVID. So that was exactly what we were talking about, helping them understand how long they'd have to be at home, how long the quarantine was, how the rules were changing, because our service is nurse-led. They were asking for clinical advice on a rapidly new and expanding concept that was happening back in March that we didn't know that much about, and we learned as everybody else was learning, but we had to gather that data for our clients. So definitely average handle time went up. We also found that our customer satisfaction stayed at a really high level. I think for the reasons that Phil mentioned, people were really happy to have a resource that was available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that could give them this information that they wanted with really quick pickup times. So that was something that we noticed. Our customer satisfaction stayed at a very high level. I will say, similar to David, that our ability to track what was going on and track the performance and all of that was quite similar to prior to the pandemic, because we did measure all of those things. So we have a number of different products with Genesis that allow us to do screen recordings and voice recordings and gather the data to understand the quality of all the calls. And all of that was maintained. And that was happening whether the service center representatives were in the office or at their home offices. So to be honest, we were well set for gathering the data. I think what really changed was, and Phil mentioned, those spikes in volume were really a big, were something that we had to deal with and figure out how to plan how many people were on and when they were on. Because what we found was as the population moved into home working, their schedules changed as well. And the times in which they called us tended to be later. So we used to have a massive percentage of our calls between 6 and 9 a.m. And that moved a couple of hours later when people were working from home. And that was a big change from a workforce management perspective that we had to get used to. You know, during that certain periods of time, we would expect a lot of calls about cold, cough, and flu or musculoskeletal issues. But all we were getting was COVID-19, right? So we went from 0 to 70% of our calls being about COVID-19. And that was a big change as well that we had to deal with.
So certainly dealing with a topic and the support knowledge area that was changing every day and continues to change, really. What a challenge for agents. You've also said some interesting things about sort of employees' physical and mental health as we continue in a hybrid workforce. Can you talk a little bit about some of what you're doing there and what you've learned about how we address the mental and physical health of employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things, we talked a little bit about this before in terms of the short term and the long term. And short term,
Sure.
people got the adrenaline going, they're dealing with the crisis, they don't notice what's necessarily happening in their lives. But as it spreads to over several months, you really have to make sure you put into place as robust programs as you possibly can to support people daily, weekly, and then on a long-term basis as well. So we added in, we have a number of benefits through our program, but we added in things like remote counseling capabilities and remote GP services, where our call center people could call in if they had an issue that they were dealing with, as well as kind of the tools that are a part of our own absence program that allow our managers to help their direct reports come back into the business. So those kinds of things are useful on an ongoing basis. But we utilized a lot more video chats, a lot more video calls, chat-based communication, huddles that were no longer just a few people sitting around a couch, but a few people having a virtual coffee break over a video call. And those kinds of things being scheduled into the day, being done by what we called virtual walkers, who would keep an eye on what was going on each of the calls in a queue, and either pull somebody off a queue at a certain point if they felt they needed to be supported, or gathered a few people off of the queue to have conversations and make sure that everyone was okay. So trying to do these things in the moment through video chat, regular chat, and phone calls, and providing those robust services over the long term were and are ways that we're helping our customer service reps to deal with all of the challenges and stresses that they're facing.
Got it. Certainly in the moment is really important, both for employee engagement and for serving customers better in that moment, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's different when you can see people and you're physically walking down the aisle of the call center people, and when you're trying to tap into different queues and different calls so you can hear what people are going through and help them through it afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Phil, anything you want to add about employee health and maybe a little bit about team huddles? I know you had some great points there.
Yeah, I think similar to Ian again, it's about being deliberate, and with huddles for team members that were previously in the office, the thing that they missed the most initially was the social aspect of grabbing a coffee right before a huddle or after. And so we built into our huddles a bit of fun social time. We created a number of games that team leaders were able to use, whether it was a quick bingo or a little scavenger hunt, which sounds simplistic, but really got great response from our team members and our agents, who were able to use those to have a little more conversation social interaction as they went. The other parts that we've had as well or added in are our recognition events. So typically we would have once a quarter recognition where our best agents would come forward on a stage and have an opportunity to be highlighted in front of their peers for their accomplishments. And we shifted all those virtual as well, and have used a number of platforms that allow for social interaction, whether it's break-off groups where some team members who have been long-term friends can chat, or others can mingle and pop between different locations. So those have been helpful for us in terms of addressing the mental health and also the social aspect that was missing from COVID and not being face-to-face in an office.
As we think about employees, I know, Ian, you're in a very expensive location. You're being able to recruit employees now if they're going to be work from home further afield than maybe before, meaning you have access to a more diverse talent pool, potentially a less expensive talent pool, maybe. But how do you think about engaging those employees who may never have physically set foot in an office? How do you think about engaging employees that may never sit down physically with a team for any period of time?
Well, you're absolutely right. We've been fortunate now that we can kind of cast our net a little further for experienced call center professionals. And to a certain extent, it's not so much the price of that talent, but the availability. So we've been able to recruit a little faster in certain instances because we didn't have to worry about their commute into the office. And that's been really helpful when we needed to bring more people in rather quickly. In terms of people who haven't been to the office, haven't necessarily met their managers in person, we've made extensive use of online training and induction sessions, both group and individual chats and group and individual video sessions to keep people aware of what's going on. And as Phil mentioned, we've done a lot of kind of special events as well. Like we had our Christmas holiday party online. We had a Halloween party online. We had a lot of different sessions that allowed people to get together. We do a lot of virtual bake-offs where unfortunately you can't taste anything, but you do see what people are baking, and we judge it, and prizes are awarded, and we try to do fun things like that. So that's a big part of making people feel what they're missing necessarily in a in-person environment. We do a lot of virtual check-ins, a lot of virtual one-to-ones. We do virtual high fives where colleagues send out recognition to their colleagues for different levels of support that they may have received. We do virtual town halls, are a standard part of our communication, where we have Q&A that goes on, both pre-prepared questions that different members of the team will answer. We have new employees that are given the opportunity to talk about their roles and what they're enjoying and some of the challenges that they faced and how they overcame those challenges. And we're replacing those in-person elements with with the best that we can from a virtual perspective. And I think colleagues are more closely aligned with their technology than they were before, because they rely on that to get a feel for what's happening. And that can be a good thing as well, because they become more expert at a lot of the tools that they use to service our members, as well as what's helping them get through any of the issues that they're going through. And we also have the capability to do slightly larger induction groups than we were able to do before, because you could bring more people more easily together to do those induction groups, and then into smaller groups as they pass out of induction to help them with specific issues and ensure the experience is more kind of closely controlled through those video interactions. And that's been really helpful in bringing people on who, as you say, haven't been to the office, may never be in their office, may never even meet their manager face-to-face, which is an issue, but it's one that we're utilizing technology to get the best out of.
How are you thinking, Phil, about engaging folks who are maybe never in the office?
Yeah, well, I just want to add one quick thing. I think that Ian just sparked a thought on as well that I can share, and then I'll talk about engaging in the office. The other one for us in terms of a learning through COVID, which is something we'll hold on to, is the more effective use of virtual instructor-led training. So prior to the pandemic, as I mentioned, we had 40% of our team that were remote, but those team members were all trained in the office. So they would start in the office, go through training, and then head home for their at-home experience. And with COVID, we didn't have that opportunity or luxury. And we changed from a model where we had previously only limited virtual instructor to a 2-hour slot to now where we have courses up to 3 weeks that team members are on. And in order to do that, so we've done a couple of things. We've reduced our class sizes. We've increased the number of instructors on those classes as well. The instructors were also getting some fatigue from being in from a video and being on for that many hours. So they alternate throughout the day. And then the backup in the alternation is able to assist the students that are having a challenge in the class or answering questions offline as well. So that was effective, a good learning for us, and something we'll continue post-pandemic as well. In terms of your other question, Rebecca, engaging team members away from the office, we've done things, as I mentioned, around the recognition, et cetera. We've also, for those different events, sent care packages to our team members, just a small UPS or FedEx package with some things for them to open and enjoy on some of those sessions. And I think it's been a good delighter that our team members have enjoyed. And the other part we've done is getting constant and regular feedback. We have a twice annual engagement survey that we hold and take a lot of merit in it in reviewing the feedback and addressing it. And so that's been very helpful. But we've also done much more regular touch points with team members, both one-on-one and town halls and frontline sessions, to ensure that we're understanding the challenges and understanding the opportunities and addressing those as those have come up.
David, how are you thinking about engaging folks who may never be in the office?
As I said before, we stood up a team of over 100 agents internationally, and that was all done, as was mentioned previously. A lot of our work from home agents were trained in the office,
Right.
and then went to go work from home. So it was a little different dynamic training a virtual team internationally. There was a lot of use of technology, obviously, with video sessions, and having some of our more experienced agents on the phones. We used a lot of chat rooms and things of that nature in order to disseminate knowledge and best practices, and being a data guy, again, coming up with a lot of different reporting mechanisms to help kind of see what kind of issues we're dealing with, and then circling back and training and retraining was quite a different experience for us.
Sure, having to train them all remotely as well as on board must have been a real challenge. So how do we think about measuring engagement moving forward? Are there things that we'll take away from this that are different and better as we think about engaging a hybrid workforce that maybe necessity brought in the short term, but better judgment will bring on for the longer term? What will we measure differently, or anything you're thinking about measuring differently?
I think there are certain ways in which we're bringing more people together, because you can bring more people together on a virtual coffee break than you could potentially bring people together in the office or in different environments. So I think that's happening more frequently, and it's allowing us to bring people who may have been farther afield. So some of our more experienced or older staff who were already home working didn't have as much interaction with the people who were in the office. And now everyone's kind of on that common footing. And I find that that's one of the benefits. You're asking if there's anything better. I think everyone feels like they're in the same place. They're not missing anything that potentially the office workers were getting that they're not getting. And it breeds a slightly more collegial atmosphere amongst the entire workforce. So that's one of the, I think, positives that we'll probably draw out of this, and our ability to do things more frequently, because you could easily set up a little huddle, a team huddle at any point in the day. You might do that more frequently, and I think that's kind of one of the takeaways. In terms of measuring engagement, we do a employee satisfaction survey as well. We do that. We were doing that only once a year. I think we'll be doing that a little bit. We're now doing it a little bit more frequently because things are changing. You know, we need to address the fact that I actually don't have all the answers to how this is going to work going forward. We were writing that pandemic handbook kind of as we were living it back, 6, 8, 9 months ago, and now we're writing a different handbook. We're writing a handbook on how do you work potentially fully remote on an ongoing basis without the use of an office. So taking the feedback from our staff is really important, and doing that on a regular basis and allowing them to free flow that information into us with the knowledge that we're really taking what they say into consideration and potentially acting on it quickly is something that we'll move forward with. So that's pretty exciting, I think.
Employee satisfaction surveys quarterly or pulses more often, or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of the two. So pulses are really important, quick surveys that just go out and say, how are things going? How's this new process we're working on? How are you feeling? What's changing? How's your environment? Do you need us to support you in any way? Are there other services that you might need that we could look into? So you need to do that more regularly, and even talk about that in the one-to-ones, and try to gather that all together and find out how we change our benefits program, how we change our support structures so that people are well supported. So you need to do that on a regular basis, and then probably move to a more formal quarterly piece where you're asking the same kind of questions over time so that you can get a perspective on trends. Are things changing? Are things improving? Are the small things that we're changing from those pulses making a difference over time? So I think that's how we'll move forward.
Phil, are you making changes in the way you measure engagement, and will you make changes moving forward, you think?
Not on the formal engagement side. We have the twice annual survey. We did update the questions last fall based on working from home, and that's for all of our team members, contact center and beyond as well, just to try and get more insights on the work environment, working from home, work processes, and how those are being outside of the office, et cetera. So our method hasn't overall changed, the questions have. But as Ian said as well, we've really doubled down on coaching methodology in our frontline teams, and the importance of empathy and asking questions and seeking to understand as we're having those coaching sessions as well. I think those one-on-one opportunities are where we really get the most insight on an individual basis on how team members are doing and can really address them.
I'm going to put you on the spot, David, because you're the data guy. Any last words on measuring engagement and how you think about measuring engagement moving forward?
I'm a numbers guy, so when I hear measure, usually it's about measuring performance. That's what I do. So we've put a good amount of effort into evaluating and reevaluating what mix of performance indicators we're looking at, not only from an agent perspective, but how is our company doing? How is our department doing? How are we providing good service? Are we not? And we've had to change our expectations. A lot's changed as you know. As we've used gamification, we've had to kind of reevaluate our thresholds and what we consider good performance. And we've had a lot of success with that, driving good performance in ways that we could measure it even on a monetized level. More queue time equals more agent availability equals better customer service and response times.
I want to thank our panelists today, Ian, David, and Phil, for sharing your time, your generosity with your insights with me and with the audience. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Our pleasure. Thanks a lot, Rebecca.